This conference will now be recorded.
We'll try and talk about the very important of a program. So, as usual, as always, so we will talk about program. Okay, so whenever we say or we start about or we talk about a program, so what is a program? A program is a so somebody is asking you what to define a program basically. If somebody is asking you to define a program, so what you do generally, so you say a program is a set of instructions. The program is a set of instructions along with the data. Okay, so what is a program? A program is a set of instructions along with the data considered as inputs. Considered as input. So program is a set of instructions along with the data considered as input that are to be processed. Okay, so that are to be processed to give the information to give the information. So what is a program here? So program is a set of instructions along with the data considered as input that are to be processed to give the information. So this is what exactly we mean by a program. Okay, right. So now when somebody is telling me a program definition is this, so I would like to tell them that as a programmer, okay, so as a programmer, okay, so as a programmer, so what we are going to do, we are going to push the inputs first. Okay, so as a programmer what we are going to do, so we are going to push the inputs. Okay, so what do I mean by pushing the inputs here? Pushing the inputs means, so pushing the input means giving the instruction and the data. Okay, giving the instruction and the data. So what do you I mean by giving the instruction and giving the data basically? So I'm giving the instruction and I'm giving the data. Okay, so what do I mean by the instruction here? So as an example, if I say add, okay, so if I say add, so add is an instruction and I'll say 4 comma 3. So what is 4 comma 3 here? 4 comma 3 is the data. 4 comma 3 is the data. And what you are going to do? You are going to process. Okay, so you are going to process the data. Okay, so you are going to process the data. So depending on the, so what you are going to do? So you are going to process the data depending on the instruction, depending on the instruction. Now for example 4 and 3, so what you are doing here, you are adding 4 and 3. Okay, so you are adding 4 and 3 and you are giving me out something like 7. So what is this 7? 7 is going to be the information. Okay, so 7 is going to be the information. So in simple words we call it as the output. We call it as the output. So what we are doing here, we are giving the input and we are processing the inputs and we are getting the information out. Okay, so this is the way that we are looking at the program definition. Okay, so the first and foremost thing that every programmer should understand is the data. Okay, so is the data part of the program. So data, so whenever somebody is talking about the data, so data means, okay, so what do I mean by the data basically? Okay, so data are the raw facts. So data are the raw facts. Okay, so data are what? So data are the raw facts. Okay, so data are the raw facts that are needed to be processed, that are needed to be processed. Okay, so the data are the raw facts that are needed to be processed. So what do I mean by the data here? So the data are the raw facts in the program that are needed to be processed. Okay, so in programming, so we have the following data components. We have the following data components. So what are the data components that are available in the program? So we will observe what are the data components that are available in the program. Okay, so first thing, always remember we have numbers. Okay, so we have numbers. Okay, numbers are the first and foremost data components of the program. So without numbers, okay, so without numbers we cannot have any program, we cannot have any program. So numbers are the first and foremost components of the program. Okay, so data components rather. So numbers are the first and foremost data components of the program. Okay, so we have we generally have two types of numbers. Okay, so two types of numbers. Okay, so we generally have two types of numbers. First one is going to be, okay, so we generally have two types of numbers. First one is going to be integers. Okay, so first one is going to be what? Integers. So whenever we are talking about integers, we say the numbers that are used for counting. The numbers that are used for counting. So what are integers? Integers are the numbers that are used for the counting. Okay, the numbers that are used for the counting. Now, for example, if I'm saying there are 5 members in the class, there are 15 chairs in the class. Okay, so there are 510 employees in the class. Okay, I mean in a company. So what are all these? These are all the numbers. Okay, so these are all the numbers. Okay, for example, if I'm saying number of students, okay, so number of students, I'll say 25. Okay, so then I will say number of chairs. Okay, so number of chairs I will say 57. Okay, so like this you can talk about the count. Okay, so number of employees, so number of employees 528 employees. So like this we have the integers uh, looked up like this. Okay, so number of students 25, number of chairs 57, number of employees 528. So like this, so we have the integers lined up here. Okay, so we have the integers lined up. So whenever we talk about integers, integers are the numbers generally used for the counting purpose. Okay, so generally used for the counting purpose. So whenever I say integers, integers are the numbers that are used for the counting purpose. Okay, so now this is how we look at integers basically. So to be they are said to be the numeric data, numeric data, or else I'll say single numeric data, be the single numeric data. So they are said to be the single numeric data. Why I'm saying single numeric data over here is, now for example, if I'm saying 25. Okay, so what is this 25 here? So 25 is single numeric data. So then I say 57. So what is 57 here? So 57 is single numeric data. So you have 528. So this is also single numeric data. Okay, so this they are said to be single numeric data. Okay, so with a single part, with a single part, that is going to be an integer part, an integer part. So what we are trying to talk about here? So we are trying to talk about the single numeric data. It is going to be a single part, okay, so which is integer part. So now what I'm trying to say here is this is going to be the integer part, okay, so it's going to be integer part. We call it as ip basically, okay, ip. So ip is the integer part over here, and here we say ip the integer part, and here we say ip the integer part. Okay, so what we are talking about here, we are talking about the integers are going to be the numbers which are used for the counting. So they are the single numeric data with the single part. So single numeric data with single part, which is also known as the integer part, which is also known as the integer part on the data. Okay, right. So now what are the numbers that can be considered as integers? The next part of the story is what are the numbers that can be considered as integers in programming? In programming, in programming, all the positive, all the positive, comma negative numbers, all the positive, negative numbers, along with zero, along with zero. Okay, so in programming all the positive numbers, negative numbers along with zero are said to be integers, are said to be integers. In programming all the positive numbers, all the negative numbers are said to be integers. Okay, so in simple terms, if I say, in very simple terms, if I say so 0 plus or minus 1, okay, so plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, okay, so plus or minus 4, and so on and so on. So all these numbers are said to be integers, all these numbers are said to be integers. In programming all the positive numbers, all the negative numbers along with the zero are said to be integers. So okay, so it can be any big number, so it can be any big number, it can be any small number. Okay, so small number something like minus 999, okay, so and you have something like 99, so this is also integer and this is also integer. All the positive numbers, all the negative numbers in the world are said to be integers. So to give a clear mathematical idea of these numbers, if you remember number line which we learned in the childhood, okay, 0, plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4, and so on. And here minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, and so on. Okay, so like this we have the numbers which are there on the number line, which are there on the number line. So this is number line basically for you. Okay, so whenever we have the numbers based on the number line, so those numbers we call it as, okay, so those numbers we call it as the integers, we call it as the integers, the numbers which will not have any uh, other thing, only the integer part will be there. Okay, only the integer part will be there. Okay, so in that way you are looking at the, okay, so you are looking at the integer. So whenever I'm talking about the integer, so you need to understand that the integers are the numbers with only a single part, which is going to be the integer part, which is going to be the integer part. Okay, so it is going to be integer part, so the negative numbers and the positive numbers and all zero also. Okay, so zero also, so zero also is said to be the integer only. Okay, now the next question that comes is, so there are not only these numbers, so there are some numbers, for example the number between 2 and 3. So the number between 2 and 3 is 2.5. So 2.5 definitely will not come under the integer. So what it will come under as? Okay, so now we will try and understand. We will talk about the next numbers. We call it as float point numbers. Okay, so float point numbers. So what are the float point numbers? Okay, so just now I told you that whenever we are talking about integers, all single valued numbers, okay, so with single part. But what is float point numbers here? Float point numbers are the numbers with the uh, so with three parts, basically with three parts, so those are said to be integer part, fractional part, and the decimal point. Okay, so the numbers that are used for measurements, basically used for measurements. Okay, the numbers that are used for measurements. Okay, so what is the uh, okay, so measurement spelling. So measurements. Okay, so now if I have to tell you a simple example of this, so I will say area of a room. Okay, so area of a room is going to be 185.26 square feet. Okay, so what is this basically? So this is nothing but the float point number. So this is nothing but the float point number. So like this, you can have anything. Okay, so you can have anything. Okay, so okay, for example, run rate of RCB. So what is run rate of RCB? So 0.568 something. Okay, what is this? This is also a float point number. It's also a float point number. So like this, you will go for, okay, so like this, you will go for the float point numbers. Okay, so float point numbers. So these are the measurements basically. So these are the measurements as I told you. So and then what you need to understand here is, so they are okay, so what they are going to be, they are the numbers with the three parts. They are the numbers with the three parts. So first part is going to be, okay, so they are the numbers with the three parts. The first part is going to be integer part. So second part is going to be, okay, so integer part we will call it as IP. Okay, so integer part we will call it as IP. Okay, so integer part we will call it as IP, and then we have the second part which we call it as decimal point. Decimal point. So decimal point we call it as DP. Okay, so we call it as DP, and the third part is going to be fractional part. So fractional part we call it as FP. Okay, so fractional part we call it as FP. So what exactly I'm talking about here is, so now you take up this. So if you say, okay, so for example, if I am saying 185.26, okay, so 185.26, so simply if I'm writing like this, okay, so here, so if I'm writing like this, so what you are trying to say up here, so you are trying to say that, okay, so this is the integer part, and this is the decimal point, and this is going to be the fractional part. Okay, so this 185 is coming under the, okay, now for example I have 0, so somewhere around I have 184, and somewhere around I have 185. Okay, 185.26 will come somewhere here. Okay, so 185 is the integer part. Okay, so 185 is the integer part. Okay, so dp is nothing but the decimal point, so the point which will separate the integer part and the fractional part, and 0.26 here. So this is something like, if somebody is writing something like 141 by 3. Okay, so 41 by 3, so this 4 is like integer, and 1 by 3 is the fraction. Okay, so 1 by 3 is the fraction. So what 1 by 3 will give? So 3, so 3 0 here, so 3 0.3. Okay, so 3 3 is 9, so again here is 0, again 3, so it will go on. So this will be something like 4.33. Okay, 4.33 means, so 4.33 means what will happen here? So it will give you uh, integer part, decimal point, and the fractional part. Okay, so fractional part. So in this way you are looking at the float point numbers. Okay, so in this way you are looking at the float point numbers. So whenever I'm saying float point numbers, so they have three parts: integer part, decimal point, and the fractional part. Okay, so it can be anything. So now for example, just we took the run rate, right? So we took the run rate. So run rate is something like 0.568. So what is this 0.568 here? 0.568 is nothing but 0 is the integer part. Okay, so this is the decimal point and this is the fractional part. Okay, so like this, you can have the so like this, you can have the float point numbers also. Okay, so float point numbers also. Whenever I'm talking about the float point numbers, so this is the way that we can represent them. Okay, so this is the way that we can represent them. So what all the kinds of numbers that we have seen? So we have seen two types of numbers. So one is integer. So integer means integer means so you have the numbers like 3, 4, 3, 5, 8, 7, 9, 6. Okay, so like this you can have all the numbers with single part. But when you come to float point values, so when you come to float point values, so float point value, so you are having 4.36. What is this 4.36 here? 4.36 is going to be a fractional part. Okay, so here you have uh, fractional part, here you have decimal point, and here you have the integers. Okay, so in that way you are looking at the integers and the float point numbers as a part of the numeric data, so whenever we say numeric data, so this is all about the numeric data. Okay, all about the numeric data. So then we have something like uh, character data. Okay, so what we are going to work with next in programming, so we are understanding the data today. So character data, so character data means the collection of one or more characters. Okay, so collection of one or more characters. So character data means collection of one or more characters. Okay, so what is character data here? Collection of one or more characters. Okay, so collection of one or more characters characters enclosed enclosed under the quotes. Okay, so collection of one or more characters enclosed under the quotes. Okay, so there will be different kinds of quotes. Okay, so for example we have single quotes. Okay, so single quotes, so you have something like a. So sometimes you have double quotes. So for example, you are having five. Okay. So now you will ask me, like five is already a number. No, how we are saying it as a character? Because it is put under the quotes. As it is put under the quotes, or as it is kept under the quotes, we call it as the character data. Okay, so we call it as the character data. And Python especially allows you to have uh, okay, so hello. Today is Friday. Today is Friday. Okay, so what I'm talking about here? I'm talking about okay, so talking about different type of code. So Python will allow this type of code also. Okay, so this type of, and you also can have okay, so now what you are having here? So you are having triple double quotes. Okay, so you are having triple double quotes and triple single quotes. So these are called as triple single quotes. These are known as triple double quotes. So these are known as triple double quotes, and these are double quotes, and these are single quotes. Okay, So whenever we have the character data can be kept it here. So in Python, what we call them, in Python, what we call these numbers or call these character, that is a different story. This is like simple program. Okay, so what simple programming requires? So simple programming requires all this kind of data. And finally, we will be looking at the Boolean data. Okay, so we will be looking at the Boolean data. So whenever I say Boolean data, okay, so whenever I say Boolean data, remember that they are the flag based values. Okay, so they are the flag based values in the programming, which may, so which will, I should say, which will be either true or false, either true or false. So it can be either true or false, only two values, only two values. So this is about the Boolean data. So basically Boolean data is like you have only two values. Okay, so either true or false. Okay, and never put them under the double quotes. Okay, so if, okay, small note I'll write here. So note, the Boolean data, the Boolean data must not be kept under the quotes, under the quotes. Otherwise, the whole meaning, otherwise the whole meaning gets changed. The whole meaning gets changed. That is so what kind of change that you are going to get is we get the, so we get the, okay, Boolean data must not be kept under the quotes, otherwise the whole meaning gets changed. That is, we get the Boolean data as, okay, so we get the Boolean data as character data, as character data, as character data. So what I'm trying to talk about here, so Boolean, so Boolean only two values, as I told you. It might be either true or it might be either false. Okay, so Boolean, it might be either true or it might be false. Okay, now if we are trying to talk about the character data, so the same true, if you want it like a character or a collection of characters, so you can say true. Okay, you can say true under the quotes. Okay, so you can say true under the quotes. And same thing here, if you are saying false, okay, so it is it is false under a character. False without quotes, true without quotes. But what should be there with quotes? The characters should be there with quotes here. Okay, character should be there with the quotes. Okay, so that's what the idea behind this particular Boolean. Okay, so whenever we are talking about the Boolean here, so this is the way that we need to take the things into consideration. So Boolean data, so Boolean true, Boolean false, so Boolean string, and this Boolean string. Okay, so this is, I mean, Boolean value as string, Boolean value as string. Okay, but this is not the correct representation. The correct representation is going to be this. Okay, so this is all about the data items. Okay, so data items, especially the numbers. Okay, so especially the numbers. So what are the things that we have learned here today? So we talked about the data. Okay, so data, so we have integers. Okay, so we have float point numbers, we have character data, and we have the Boolean data. Okay, so integers means the numbers. So the base of every programming is going to be numbers only. Okay, so going to be numbers. So we have two types of numbers generally. One is integers and one is float point numbers. Okay, so integers means they are single based values. Okay, so float means they are multi based values. Okay, so multi based values. and these are single values. Okay, so in that way you are looking at the integers and the float point numbers. And generally float point numbers mean three parts: integer part, decimal point, and the fractional part. When you talk about character here, characters are uh, the characters. So here a is a character, 5 is a character, hello today is Friday is a character based data. Okay, so but collection of characters we generally call it as strings, but here character data is enough. Okay, so in this way you are looking at the things, and then boolean means either true or false, and never ever put them under the quotes. Okay, so this is the idea that we have for today, and these are the things that we learned in today's session. So we mainly concentrated on the data part. Okay, so anyone having any doubts, any questions? Last 6 to 7 minutes we can spend on questions and doubts or anything. Yeah, any questions? Lakshmi, Jaisima, Swapna? Yeah, if any questions, any clarification required, you can please let me know. Okay, so if not, we will be meeting in our next session. Thank you so much. So we will meet tomorrow, right?